Hello, this is Dread from Epic Builds, where you can find quality content for the game Last Epoch. We work hard here at Epic Builds and would appreciate a comment and a like, as that's the best way to tell YouTube we are doing a good job. All of these builds are homegrown, no save file editing, no deception, no underperforming setups, just epic builds. Cue the video. In today's video topic, we're going to be going over my new build, Bleed, Lich, Rip Blood. So this is utilizing the new unique called Flayer's Pride. Pretty much it's a shield that gives you 100% bleed chance global and 40% bleed effect. Why this is so strong is because Bleed Lich has the problem of not being able to get enough bleed percentage chance on its gear. So having a shield that gives you this much bleed chance on a class that doesn't really need its shield is very strong. And this added with the combination of the new base, the Dragon Bone Axe, which is 100% bleed chance implicit, it allows you to get into insane amounts of bleed chance. So we're building this like old foes Poison Lich, except instead of poison, we're doing bleed. Now, I did some testing and we figured out that the node in Rip Blood that proliferates itself once you kill an enemy does work if you kill the enemy with a dot that is applied by Rip Blood. Why this is so strong is because what happens is our dot will finish on one mob, and then it will proliferate to the other and then keep killing and keep jumping. And it's very strong in combination with the Transplant, as Transplant casts 3 Rip Bloods instantly when you use it, and it allows you to clear packs like it's nothing. This in combination with the explosions that Transplant gets, which is about 9 explosions, which will take all of your global bleed chance and multiply it by 9, which is our main single target damage source. And on top of that, we also utilize the explosions from Bone Curse to apply even more bleeds to make our clear even more buttery smooth. Along with all of this, it makes us do a lot of explosions, and pretty much it's like bleed explosions. It's pretty cool in that regard. But otherwise, this is your very stereotypical Lich setup, as we have Lich form and of course Death Seal. There's not really much you can do differently with this because, of course, Lich has been figured out for a very long time now, and there's not really much you can do differently. You could play this with Marrow Shards technically instead of Rip Blood, but I wouldn't suggest it, as Marrow Shards is very clunky and not fun to use. But you can always do that. This can be fitted into a bunch of different builds. Like there's a few ideas. You can even do Hungering Souls if you technically wanted to. Now, the reason why, like I said, I wanted to do Rip Blood was because of the proliferation node, as it makes it feel really good when clearing monoliths. And once we get enough damage through just transplanting around, we should be able to clear packs with ease. This also means that we're probably going to be needing to focus on getting as much cooldown recovery speed with transplant as possible, as it's our main single target source. This means that we might need to shove a Stymied Fate in the build, but we're also running Salt the Wounds, a Flayer's Pride, and a Valdir's Chalice. So shoving in a Stymied Fate either means really expensive blessings or really expensive gear. So I might be dumping the Valdir's Chalice in the end just to run more resistances, just so that we can run a Stymied Fate. If you don't know, Stymied Fate gives you about 24% cooldown recovery speed with Transplant. This on top of all your other cooldown recovery speed will bring your Transplant down to about I think 2.5 seconds, which is preferred, as that allows you to stack a lot of bleeds on single target. This as well, there's actually new bleed duration nodes at the top of Lich. It wasn't added now. It was added a few patches ago when they added more nodes to the base tree, and it was pretty much nigh unusable back in the day because Bleed Lich wasn't really a thing back in the day. But thanks to Salt the Wounds and Flayer's Pride, Bleed Lich is back on the menu, and this allows you to focus on more of an explodey playstyle. Allows you to do a lot of damage with bleed. Right now, once I'm in Death Seal and I'm in Reaper form as well, I have 2,000 damage bleeds. This is without the trickery of Spirit Plague. So that's a very large bleed, allowing us to do a lot of damage. So that in combo will allow us to clear monoliths with ease. With that being said, let's get into the game, shall we? Well, here we are in game with the build. The name is Rip Wandering Spirits. Forever shall we miss you. So as you can tell, I'm actually only level 74, and I just finished my first level 90 monolith, as that's the new tradition. Uh, so this build's a little too fast for me, as we're a little underleveled, and I was getting my ass handed to me sometimes because just generally I just wasn't leveled enough. I only have 1100 HP. I'm not res capped, so the fact that I even got here in the first place is a goddamn miracle. So we're gonna go over the skills, the main parts of the skills. This is going to be an overview of the build, and the next day or the day after that is going to be a full build guide. So watch out for that. So for here, the main thing we're doing is mainly this node, Blood Catalyst. Rip Blood will automatically cast itself on a nearby enemy if it kills an enemy but no longer creates blood orbs. This effect can repeat and chain to other enemies, and it cannot trigger if you're out of mana. So the reason why this is so important is because this counts if you bleed a target and the bleed ends and they kill them, like the bleed kills it, it will make the blood orb, the rip blood, attack another enemy, allowing you to proliferate your ailments, which is pretty strong, especially in packs. As you can tell in the footage, I'm just transplanting into packs and utterly annihilating them, which is very nice because that's in combination with, of course, all the transplant explosions as well. Then we are mainly utilizing Ruptured Corpse as well for the explosion chance, as that's just a small AoE, and we don't really care about the damage the explosion does, but it will inherit our global bleed chance and all of our ailment chance, and kind of make our explosions even more nutty. And then, of course, we have Cloven Fesh. So since we have Cursed Limbs, all I have to do is cast and then attack, and then I will be applying Bone Curse on every hit, which means we pretty much have 100% uptime on Bone Curse, which is another 75% chance to bleed, which is pretty neat. We also have 12% kill threshold on Bone Curse, and we have 4%, 20% kill threshold here. You have to get the kill threshold to get up to here, I believe. Although you could probably make the assumption of going through this node as well, but Bone Curse isn't like the most necessary part of the build, so I'll revamp this later. Then, of course, Reperform. Reperform's pretty standardized. There's nothing too crazy about this. The only thing different is I'm running for Death's Door because I want the increased damage on low life, because we're going to be always on low life thanks to Death Seal whenever we want to be doing damage. So that's the really only difference than usual. This is your stereotypical Death Seal tree. We are going to be grabbing Mortal Pulse because we're turning it into a physical spell, which means it'll apply our skill, apply our bleeds, obviously, is pretty strong. The most obvious Death Seal setup. The only thing different is I'm grabbing Skeletal Sheath, so we get Bone Armor on the duration that we're thing, and it makes it so we just take 10% less damage. Now, if we had extra points, we would grab 3 points in Bone Armor. To be honest, we might actually grab 3 points in Bone Armor since we do have the 12% kill threshold, so I think I might just do that right now, actually. That might actually be better. Yeah, that's actually probably a lot better. See, these builds are always changing. This is why I play through builds instead of just respecking level 100 characters, because I never notice things like that, like little inefficiencies. And that's pretty much it for the skills, like the skill like combinations. It's not too crazy. There will be a build planner in the description. I plan on going it into more depth once we actually make the video. Now, for the actual tree itself, the most important stuff is we're grabbing the bleed duration here, as the more bleed duration, the better single target we'll have. Then, of course, in Lich itself, we have the bleed chance here for serrated bones, and of course, the uh, physical penetration. We actually want to grab the critical strike multiplier because this gets turned into bleed effect thanks to Salt the Wounds. And of course, 5 points in the Soul Maw for the health leech and the increased health leech. Everything else is pretty self explanatory. Like I said, once I make the build guide, I'll be a lot more into it. Then I am using 3 uniques. We don't necessarily need Valdir's Chalice. This is just extra. Bleed duration is really strong for single target, and the leech is insane. Flare's Pride, like I said, I would heavily suggest farming this before playing this build. How do you get a Flare's Pride? Well, what you do is you go to Abomination and follow the Outcast and farm Empowered Abomination, and you'll do just fine. Then for the gloves, of course, Salt the Wound. I can show you how powerful they are. We go from 351 to 495, so they're not as necessary as they are on like the Bleed HOA build. You can get away with it because you do have bleed. You can get bleed effect on prefixes, and you also get bleed effect on the Flare's front. Flayer's Pride. So you don't actually need Salt the Wound. To be honest, if I manage getting enough bleed effect, I might actually drop Salt the Wounds for something like, for instance, Atrophies, as this build can obviously get physical shred, but Pen is preferred on bosses. So you could always run a pair of Atrophies for the 25% pen against resistances for damage over time. That might actually end up being a better damage in slot than Salt the Wound. It will also mean we don't have to run crit multi everywhere, and then we can just run prefix. On the prefix, we can run bleed effect here and bleed effect here, and then thanks to Flair's Pride, we actually get bleed effect as well. This can go up to 40%, by the way. So far, we could probably dump Salt the Wounds. Now, the reason why I want to dump these uniques is because I want to use the unique pair of boots. They're called I think they're the unique pair of boots. I can't remember. Stymied Fate, yes. And they get like 24% cooldown with Transplant. Right now we're at 3.3. We could be less because I'm not running a Transplant idle. We could be at 3 seconds right now. But I want to get even farther down below because the less of a cooldown Transplant has, the more single target damage we deal, because Transplant is all of our single target damage, as it kind of does a bunch of explosions at once. Is like does one as a base, two here, five, and then seven, five, and then seven, and then of course it goes up to eight thanks to Dance of Blood, because these Dance of Bloods can't all hit the same target, so only one will hit the boss while the other two will hit other minions. Now you can shotgun with these, especially with the blood splatter nodes inside Rip Blood, but for just efficiency's sake, we ignore that fact. So we get about 8 hits per time we transplant. If we divide that between the cooldown right now, we get about 2.5 hits per second. And if we get better cooldown, that would get all the way up to like 4 hits per second. So if we get to like 2 seconds cooldown, which would be like the perfect situation. So overall, that would be really nice. And of course, we can always cast Rip Blood, and we'll have Death Seal going, and then we'll have Hungering Souls. But yeah, the better cooldown recovery speed we have, the better. And that's pretty much it for the build overall. Like I said, we're not going too in depth with the build overall. One thing, like I said, you just want the cooldown recovery idols with increased damage while transformed. Those are your best idols. Then even more cooldown recovery speed on 3x1s, and that's pretty much it. That being said, thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you're at, and bye.